right, I'm gonna call to order the Colchester Planning Commission. It is 7:05. Second item is the agenda considerations reserved for changes to agenda items and order. Not changing anything. Very good. So right off the bat, we're going to start with our public hearing amendments to the Colchester Development Regulations Supplement 47. All right. Did I read this? Sorry about that. So we have modified bylaws relating to non-conforming uses and clarify bylaw relating to assessment of uses as residential versus non-residential purposes. Did I misstep on the public hearing? Where do we step that in right now? Okay. So that's where we start with our motion. So we need a motion to open for the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing on proposed supplement 47 of the Colchester Development Regulations.
Need a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So here we go. So this is basically for public input. So we'll start with the modified bylaw relating to the non-conforming uses. Do we have anybody discussing on that? Nope. Board have any discussion on that? Are we all set? Basically what we discussed last time? No obvious changes?
No changes.
No changes. All good with that one? All right. So we have the clarified bylaw relating to assignment of uses as related versus as residential versus non-residential for purposes of height maximums in the LS1 and LS2 district. Table A-2. Any comments from the public? No. Comments from our board? No? No?
Good.
Yeah, good. We're all good. All right. So at this point in time, we will close the public meeting, please. Make amendment for that. Motion?
Move to close the public hearing on supplement 47 of the Colchester Development Regulations.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. So next, we need, maybe I skipped something here, Kathy.
Great.
All right. For some reason, I,
Got us off the agenda.
Yep.
okay.
Where do you want me to go?
All right, so, all right.
You can move.
Item 4 is your commission discussion and potential vote.
I have to
Okay,
go onto the
there we go,
website.
thank you. I don't know why I didn't read it correctly, but I did. Okay, so now, we had no discussion on it. We're very good on that. So now we're going to make the motion for moving this to the select board.
Okay, I move to submit supplement 47 of the Colchester Development Regulations to the Colchester Select Board.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. There we go. Sweet and simple on that one. Thank you. Thank you. All right, now we're moving on. Presentation for draft FY 25 to FY 30 capital budget program. Renee Marshall, Deputy Town Manager. Thank you.
Okay.
And welcome.
Bear with us as we- Thank you. We're going to do a quick switch here.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right, while they're getting that started, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here to present the FY 25 to FY 30 capital budget program. The capital budget program is a multi-year planning tool used to identify and plan for the town's capital needs. The capital budget program consists of a capital budget, which lists and describes the capital projects that are planned to be undertaken during the coming fiscal year, as well as a capital program, which is a plan of capital projects that are proposed to be undertaken during each of the 5 following years. The plan in itself is dynamic in nature and will change from year to year as priorities, needs, and funding amounts change. So the presentation this evening will discuss what is included in the capital budget program, the different funding sources, examples of the current year's projects that have been completed or soon to be completed, as well as the total of the FY25 capital improvement projects and the amount funded from each of the various capital plans. We'll also have examples of the FY25 projects that are planned, the total capital spending for the following 5 years, the FY26 through FY30, and again, the amounts that are funded from each of those plans, other funding sources, and some of the currently unfunded projects that are eligible for inclusion in the capital budget program, and then where we are in the capital budget process today. So the capital budget process is really a very collaborative process. It involves different plan managers from other departments. So there's no one person. This plan, it takes a group effort to put it together, but it also takes a group effort to maintain it through the life of the plan. So what is included in the capital budget program? There's vehicle and equipment acquisitions, facility repairs and improvements, transportation improvements, park improvements, information technology or IT and communication improvements, as well as public safety communications and equipment. Each of the plans are funded either through a fixed tax rate, or a set reserve amount each year. The fire department capital plan, because it's a newer plan, has a set amount that comes from the municipal services budget. Once that plan is, we've settled on all of the equipment needs and the facilities. The facilities portion of the fire department plan is now established. We're still working on the equipment piece. And once we have that together, then we will likely bring that forward to the select board to have in front of the voters to have a fixed tax rate or a different funding source. So each of the capital plans, you can see the plan on the left, and on the far right is the expected FY25 program funds for a total of $1,481,871 that are going into each of those plans, or the total of the plans together for FY25. So some of these projects on the left are highlighted that have been completed in the past year or will soon be completed. The airport park pickleball court access has yet to be done, but it's in the works. You're likely seeing some paving projects that are happening right now in various town roads. We've also completed energy efficiency LED replacements, so in this room and throughout the town hall as well as the other town buildings. Around town, you've seen the installation of the solar-powered rapid flashing beacons at different crosswalks. And we have continued design work on the West Lake Shore, Prim Road, and the Bayside intersection. As well as staff knows, we were at the arrival of our long-awaited street sweeper. So that was one of the issues with COVID. We had supply chain issues and delays in a lot of equipment. So the street sweeper was definitely one of those. We waited several years for that to arrive. So for the total FY25 planned expenses is $5,385,147. If you look towards the middle on the right-hand side, 27% of that cost is coming from state and federal grants. Another 25% in the fire department capital, and that includes one of the pieces of equipment that is on order for a fire pumper truck, as well as air packs and things for the fire department. We've really done a lot of work on maintaining the buildings, so those are in good shape now, and so it'll be, and with that pumper truck, the equipment will also be in good shape. The air packs are something that's required by OSHA to be replaced every a number of years, and so that is what the air packs are for. So this is a preview of some of the expected FY25 projects. For Airport Park, there's planned to be a pickleball court shelter and a perimeter path drainage. And then again, as each year, repaving of various town roads, and for DPW, a new tandem dump truck for plowing and hauling materials. And then ongoing efforts for solar project permitting and construction. And part of the construction for the West Lake Shore Prim Road intersection may happen in '25. So for the following 5 years, or FY '26 through '30, there's a planned $14,658,295 in expenditures. And in the upper left-hand corner, you can see 36% of that will be covered by state and federal grants. Again, the next largest part of that is the capital equipment and facilities program, so that is 22% of that. Capital transportation is 24%. And then other future revenue sources, or revenue sources that we can utilize. The local option tax that was approved by voters and enacted October 1st of 2015. And as of December 31st of 23, the balance was $8,565,660. The use of the lot funds is restricted to any voter-approved capital. And so it's currently being used to pay off the existing debt from any of our voter-approved capital, which reduces the tax rate, so it's not impacting the tax rate.
Can I ask a question?
So I talked about some of the unfunded candidate projects, combine these into categories including transportation and facilities. So these are projects that are listed towards the end of the capital budget program that have a dollar amount that we've estimated for cost. There are some others that don't have a dollar amount included, but for transportation, that's about 16.1 million, and facilities, 100,000. And this brings us to where we are today with the capital budget process. So the select board heard this presentation at their May 28th meeting. And now you have it for this evening. And the select board has warned a public hearing for June 25th meeting. And after that, they may adopt it after that public hearing.
Great.
So, any questions?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I just, is it safe to assume the capital budget is informed by the master plan, the town
The town
plan? Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's certainly a factor of things that are looked at.
Mm-hmm. So how
Definitely.
to fund that, what was
Right.
put in there. And I was just wondering, how much debt do we have? How much debt do we have now that we're paying off roughly?
For that, the local option tax is funding.
No.
That is what all,
Okay,
yeah. So that amount, I would have to look, Sarita.
okay.
I think it's around close to 400,000
Okay.
for the FY25.
Good. And I just noticed the library had some, which I really love. It looked like they had some, like, I don't know, $100,000 or something in funding or preliminary something. I'm just-
So you saw that towards the end. That is
Yeah.
the unfunded capital projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was one of the pieces. So they are looking at, they're requesting that there be a needs assessment done of the library and the meeting house, which is very typical of any large projects that we have of buildings. If there's needs, that we want to do an assessment of what those needs are, the spatial needs of the building, and what the population growth is. We kind of take in all those things into consideration.
So is that assessment funded, or is that kind of in the hope that if we come into some additional revenue?
Yeah, so those projects don't currently have funding targeted to them, but they are ones that are eligible for this capital plan, so that they could be, if there's a funding source identified.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I saw a lot for the airport park. Do we have anything, do you know, for the village park? Is there anything necessary for that one?
I think that is something that they evaluate each one, so there isn't one in this capital plan that I recall.
Yep.
But they certainly look at all the parks and the needs, they assess those. And so with the different park capital plan and the recreation plan, they look at the different park needs and the infrastructure needed.
Now, is the new rec center will be wrapped into this plan eventually?
So the rec center is paid from the local option tax.
Right.
And then it's, facility needs over time, will be, addressed in that way. But no, it's entirely funded through the local option tax.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's one of the greatest things we do in town. Go ahead. You have a question, Sarita?
No,
Like, I
no,
thought
I'm
you
just
were
seeing
ready.
if I wrote
Oh,
down.
okay.
I have a question mark, but I think
Yeah.
you already answered my question,
Yeah.
Renee.
You all good, Wendy?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to recommend. And I got it right here, so I didn't get that far down.
Oh,
Highlighted one, please.
Okay, oh,
All written out, so it's easy.
I'll make a motion that the Colchester Planning Commission moves to recommend the draft FY '25, FY '30 capital budget program as presented.
All right.
I second
All
that.
right. Any discussion? All good? All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, next.
Give us just a moment to change our technology.
There's a lot of stuff to think about in this,
Okay, so
in this 47.
I know.
It's a lot of things to think about.
I know.
I'll let Kathy get loaded up a little bit.
Just if you highlight stuff, I'll
Yeah.
make the motion.
Get our pictures. That's right. That's why we do that, right? All right, so we go to Article 7. So we're going to have a commission discussion to consider possible future adjustments in the General District 3, General District 3 Form-Based Code, GD3, FBC bylaws. So this is kind of an educational part for us
Yeah.
tonight, because we don't have a full board.
Can you just remind me of the process? Are we, how far out are we from voting on?
For the next supplement, so this will be phase 1. So this will educate ourselves a little bit about the form base, what the people out there would like, that we have some direction, if there's a problem with it, if we think there's a problem with it, what we'd like to see, and if we can adjust it in our next supplement, not this one, supplement 48. That's our goal. And we have some pictures. When we get started, a little bit on...
Yeah, I think that's a good first question. So, just to set us up for where we are in this, so as a reminder, I think the commission as a whole has been talking a little bit about, how we readdress the form-based code. And so the form-based code, as we talk about, it applies to the General District 3. That is one of our districts within the town. And I believe that was adopted in, I don't want to say 2016. Is that even accurate? Somewhere before 2020.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID. I think in talking to you guys before, I think Rich was the only one who worked on it, who's currently on the commission. And so the thought was to adopt that code at that time and let it run and see how it worked out, and that's happened. And over the years, various staff members have collected some notes on where things may not be working out as intended, and where improvements could be made, or where it could be tailored to better suit the community's interests. And so those notes we've been collecting as we go. And so we've talked about that at length, and we talked, I think our initial goal had been to sort of take a look at the whole piece, and that's what we often like to do, so that we're not sort of picking apart at the edges and doing it sort of halfway. We realized that doing something like that does take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of resources between staff resources or even a consultant assistance, and we just don't have those resources right now. And so we spoke at a previous meeting about whether or not you were comfortable with taking on just a few select pieces for now. And then that's where we talked about. And so to answer your question, Sarita, about where we are and how far out we might be, that really depends on how many pieces you want to pick up and how far you want to go with potentially making adjustments to them. So what I've presented to you here, I think, is an assortment of maybe 6 or 7 pieces that you could start to unpack and to make adjustments to. There's potentially anywhere up to 15 or 20 elements that you could start to adjust, and you could adjust them in different layers. You could make slight adjustments, you could make large adjustments. You could do them as an entire package, or you could do a few at a time. And so how far are you out really depends on where you see yourself doing those, and how much you want to bite off at any one time. What I've shown you here as a potential list of items is probably something that could take you, I would say, probably 6 months of discussion. That'll get you probably 3 to 4 meetings worth of discussion, knowing that you've got other things on your agenda and not just this. You probably want to return to your Westlake Shore LS1, LS2 discussions at some point that you kicked off. There's some other pieces you've identified for Supplement 47 that you want to get to. And so you're looking at least that just for discussion, and then, as you know, the public hearing process alone takes some time. But again, that really depends on how simple or how in-depth you want to look at any of these. And again, with what we would look at tonight, and given that we are, sort of short commissioners, I would say that any changes you make, you really want to have as many commissioners here as possible as you talk through any of these items, even the smallest of them, because you may not be unanimous on all of them. You may be, and sort of taking a temperature of the group as we go is going to answer that question a little better than I can.
I just have 2 questions.
Sure.
Okay. I just have 2 questions. So can you and Zach see what this will look like? Do you have a vision about what the growth center will look like when it's done? So if we are doing something that isn't going to kind of conform to the vision when it was being designed, that's one question. And the other is, I tend to look at function over form, but I know that can be a conflict, in terms of cost and just use. And so I'm assuming you will advise us about what might be a compromise, or why, what the rationale is for this recommendation. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the conversation that you'd had even back, or the commission had even back when you first kicked this off, and that is that it's not uncommon for people to confuse form-based codes with sort of a strong architectural code, and in some communities that's actually the case. I don't think that was ever Colchester's intention, and I think that the code that you have here demonstrates that it's not about, how wide your windows are and how they're treated and what sort of cornices are placed above and beyond your window and what sort of treatments, are happening at each of your corners of your buildings. And there are some codes that are very in-depth about that, where architects get strongly involved in that. And this code isn't written that way to start with. And none of the recommendations that we would bring to you bring those either. So they're not intended to bring about a lot of costs, but what they are intended to do is to show that in between the elements of site design and in between the elements of how a building meets the street and how a building greets the street, is a popular saying, how those elements can change, placemaking, and how that's different than what you might have in a different type of neighborhood or a different part of town. And so some people might call it sort of a form-based code light. So it's not a sort of orthodox code that you'd see in some other areas. If you were to ever read any books on form-based code, this is not a strict code or traditional code in that way, in any way. This just sort of picks apart elements of that, at your choosing. And, I'd say if you looked at a very strong form-based code, a very strict traditional code, and then you looked at this, I'd call it like a 35% code, to be honest with you. It's actually very much on the light side. But it's definitely more than just your traditional zoning. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah. Again, and this is just me, I read a lot about how communities can be designed to have people interact with one another, like to create a sense of community, also by the physical structure. So I'm wondering, when the growth center was being designed, was that a consideration? Because I was looking at, on the first floor, just having retail or commercial, and then above that would be, housing or where people could stay. Is there some intentionality about, making it so people have places to, meet one another, or when they're walking? Is there some intentional way of the design to provide opportunities for people to interact with one another?
Yeah, and I think you see that, so yes, and you see that come through in a couple ways. You see that come through in use. You see that come through in what uses are supposed to exist on that first floor, and that's a question that's potentially going to be brought to you. And you see that in sort of the form too. And we've talked about this, I think we were looking through, we did sort of a visual exercise, if you remember, maybe last summer or in the fall, about what appeals to you and what are your reactions when you look at different types of buildings. And when you have buildings that just have straight facades or straight garages, that's not a human interaction. That's not that type of placemaking doesn't exist. You might have, but you have something different if you have a lot of windows, you have porches or stoops where people are sitting out. That creates a different environment, a different place, again, where the street meets the building, and the different interaction types. That's going to be very different. And so that happens in the code as well, when you're writing about whether garage facades can line a street, or whether or not straight building fronts with no door entries can line a street. That's going to create a very different feel and different function than if you don't allow that, or you require building breaks either in design or in windows or in doors. It's going to create just different use of that space.
Thank you.
So this is the whole purpose of the code. Hopefully. And to answer your other question about can we predict what'll happen? No, but we try to set the bumpers so that hopefully it'll sort of set the ring within which it can happen. Market forces are going to be what market forces are. And people are still going to have to respond to them. And individual design and different people have a different aesthetic. Building material prices are changing. there's a lot of elements that go into it, and one thing we cannot ever be successful with is, sort of regulating aesthetics is really hard. What you might find attractive may not match up what I find attractive, and it's very difficult to do that. So what we try to talk about is what are the general elements that make something inviting as opposed to attractive. And so those are what we talk about more than
Thank you.
anything else.
So we have a few pieces to look at.
So you have a few pieces. So we've had some conversations, and some of these conversations also go back to our very own volunteer development review board. So we've spoken with them. So they have seen now 1, 2, 3 specific buildings. 5. So what? Actual specific buildings?
No, maybe 6.
So the DRB now has seen, sounds like maybe 6 buildings under this code as a site plan. They've seen 2 subdivisions or PUDs under this plan, or under this code. And so they have also, as they've interpreted it and used it and spoken with applicants and spoken with staff, also provided us with some feedback of like, boy, this is, I don't think you know how hard this is to implement or to interpret or to understand. So some of this feedback comes from speaking with people who own property, speaking with people on the development review board, Zach, who reads and interprets this code more than anybody in this room. So that's sort of the basis for this list, just as a little background. It's not a comprehensive list. It is those things that we've identified as sort of rising to the top for now. Now again, I know we have a pretty sparse room. We have a pretty sparse room on this side. I think if it's okay with you, Rich, what I would propose is to sort of just highlight them, introduce them, start your wheels turning about what these things are. I would not, if you've got some initial thoughts, it might be a good place where you would assign us maybe some homework or some thoughts of things to bring back to you for future discussion. I'm not sure, unless you have very strong feelings on any of this, that it's a time for you to say yes, no, as much as it is for you to say, hey, I'd like to know more about this, or have you considered this, or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Because we're going to do it all over again with the 2 members who are missing, and of course, Rebecca, as a professional architect, is definitely going to have some insight and some
Yep.
valuable information to add.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
But unfortunately, she couldn't be here.
Yeah.
And we do have a property owner, I think, who's missing, who I think has some thoughts that they wanted to add. So,
Okay.
let me just kick it off. I think the goal is for me to sort of lead these,
Yep.
introduce them to you. All right, so something we've heard here. Skip the mouse. These are not necessarily in any particular order. Okay. So this one that's been brought to you, residential garage doors facing a C street.
Do me a favor and just pop that up a little.
You mean larger?
Yeah,
I can do that.
thanks.
As I put my glasses on.
I
All right.
I know. I'm cheating for myself.
We're a young crowd.
How's that one? No, I feel you. Okay. That better, or you need more?
One more would be fine. There you go.
There we go.
Now we got
All
it.
right. Okay. So, just as a reminder, quick tutorial. In the form-based code, just to get you guys adjusted, we have A streets, B streets, and C streets. Actually, I'll kick it off to Zach. You want to do a quick tutorial on how the form-based code works? The general layout.
I was not prepared. So the general layout is that there's street types and different dimensional standards based on the street type.
Is that what we're talking about, or is that something completely different? I can't.
That's a proposal from a developer who's currently going through the development review process for the planned unit development review, so the whole subdivision review. It's an example where, we could point out, I don't want to go totally into it just because, I know it's front of mind for me, so I'll probably spend 20 minutes talking about it. That being said, your A streets are really, they're designated as Roosevelt Highway as well as Severance and Blakely. Really your main thoroughfares. These are where your largest buildings are, buildings closest to the road, under the current code. B streets, you're kind of a step back, sort of a hybrid. You're seeing a little bit more residential development, slightly shorter buildings. Buildings can be a little bit further back from the road. And C streets are, a little bit quieter, a little bit lower traffic, smaller buildings, a little further back from the road. Again, these buildings they're not like your other zoning districts around town where, the closest you can get to the road is 30 feet. Buildings are going to be a lot closer than that on all street types. So really, for people looking at the code, it starts with street types, which are established at the subdivision level. And then the buildings are, on lots that are reviewed against what street they're on. Is that a short enough overview?
I think you're doing great. Do you have more?
Great. Not really.
Okay. So those are important basics, because we're going to be talking about A, B, and C a lot as we go through this. And it's important. Keep in mind, A is like, I don't want to call it the best. Think of it as the busiest, right? So the idea was that you were setting up those A streets to be those busy primary, most urban streets. And then you were stepping down from there to these B and C streets. And that's how it's set up under the current code. Now, I think that there had been some discussion at some point, and maybe even Rebecca was the one who raised it, I can't remember, about whether that was still the right hierarchy. That's not necessarily in front of you right now, but it might be back of mind as you consider these things. Is that the right hierarchy? Are A streets still the most relevant? Are they relevant at all? Are there a lot of buildings being built out to these, again, Severance, Blakely, Roosevelt? Combination of topography and other things, we're not seeing a lot of buildings being built out to those. And then future roadway improvements are sort of limiting some other things too. So we're not proposing that to you, but it is something that has been raised as a question. So keep that in mind about A streets. A streets, if you read through any of the tables are pretty handy as you see them in here. They're thinking urban. They're thinking these are where we want our commercial uses, taller buildings, and everything steps down pretty proportionally from there. So the A street is that tall building. It's 5 stories. It's the most commercial, and then your B, very proportional step down from 5 stories max to 4, and then you're supposed to have commercial on the ground floor unless you get a conditional use waiver from the DRB. And then your C street, you're going down exactly 1 more level to the 3 stories, and then you don't need to have that commercial component, but you're still supposed to have a tight, dense residential use. So that's sort of the background within what we're working from. So
I do just have one other item. Just because, explaining the street types and then the building types as we're kind of talking about in general, we will get into some items probably tonight that are on tables that are further down into the form-based code. And these start getting into the architectural details of buildings and how, we'll probably say under at least this first one what a projecting facade element is. Sometimes those are required. They're spelled out with like pretty exact ranges of measurements of what those should be. So we'll talk a bit about those. Sometimes they're required for, A streets, sometimes they're required for C streets, different ones. So keep that in mind. And then also there is a separate parking section. So there are certain standards for parking in these districts that we'll probably touch on as well that are different from how you'd see parking regulated across town in other areas.
And you do have in your Dropbox and I also put it in the memo that's shared with the public, an excerpt of just this section, so you didn't have to go to the entire 240 pages of our code. So you have just this section in there, you can look through that. So residential garage setbacks. This one is a standard that we only use in our form-based code district. It does not apply anywhere else in town, although it is commonly applied in other communities and throughout their town. Not necessarily in Vermont, but it's not an uncommon standard. So on C streets, again, that is our more residential, less urban area. We have a standard that says if you have a residential garage door, so garage doors are allowed. I don't know if that was a discussion of whether to even allow them. Do you recall?
Do not.
So a lot of form-based codes don't allow garage doors at all, just for context. But they are allowed. Garage doors are allowed within this code. But it does say if you're going to have garage doors and garages that are street facing, again, these are street facing. The standard is not the same if you have an alleyway. But if you have a street facing garage door, that garage door has to be set back a minimum of 8 feet behind the principal plane of the building. So what that means, your principal plane of the building is kind of what it sounds like. It's the main part of your building that's not your garage. You're gonna have a garage that then has to physically set back 8 feet from that portion of the home. So again, what I'm trying to do here is just introduce the topic for you guys to noodle on. The purpose of that, likely, I don't think I added this here. I'll add to it as I speak. My guess is it's probably to dissuade garages at all. I didn't add that here. To dissuade street-facing garages at all. But to say that if you are going to have them, that you're not having those garage doors as a dominant feature on the street. Because again, if you have excessive garage door space, that can really overwhelm a street and reduce the amount of interaction that you have. We talked about this earlier. The amount of interaction that you have between the livable part of a building and the street. You've probably been by these places where you see nothing but garage doors that run an entirety, these double, triple garages, and then you see a tiny little part of the doorway of the house. And you really just, you feel like you're walking in a dead zone. And so that's sort of one of the standards that you might have. Setting it back 8 feet, does that actually achieve that is a good question. Because this actually doesn't say that you have to reduce the size of that, it just has to be back 8 feet. So you could still have a triple car garage in this scenario, as long as you set it back 8 feet.
So as long as it's not facing the street, if it goes off to the side, I know there's one on Blakely, that's like a big house, but the garages are on the side, so you don't see it from the street. It's not facing the street, you can still see it. But this is specific to ones that face the street?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, and again, single family and duplexes are not allowed in this district. So these
Okay.
are all for townhomes.
Okay.
Am I correct in saying that?
Let me check.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that was one of
I'm
the
pretty
questions
sure,
I had
but-
now. I couldn't.
Yeah.
Well,
So this,
well, they are permitted on C streets.
They are?
They are.
Okay.
We can add it to the list. Do you want them?
Well, I'm not gonna start that up. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
But, okay, so again, this is supposed to be, this is our growth center. That's what we're talking about. This is our most urban area. I thought they weren't allowed, but they are allowed. So if you are to have these units with the garage facing the street, they have to be set the 8 foot back. So the question, and a fair question, is what goal are we achieving by setting them back 8 feet? Is it the right tool to achieve what your goal may be? So the question that I would have you ask yourself to think about is what is your goal? What would it be that you, as a commission, as a town, as a community, would like to achieve? And is this the right tool to do that? I can tell you what the common goals are, which is what I've listed here, but they may not be yours. Consider what your goals are, and then we'll consider what the right tools are to meet those. So there are other ways to achieve not having imposing dominant garages.
Sounds more like they'd be storage sheds. That's what it
Oh,
feels.
so images. Let me
And
do
I know we're
images.
getting
Yeah.
into
I
that,
promised pictures.
You gave
Yeah.
examples, I
Pictures.
think.
right?
Let's do pictures.
Oh.
That's not working.
I don't quite understand, so if you put in like townhouses. And
Bear
have
with me.
those parking garages, as long as they don't have a garage
I didn't
door
label things well.
on them, that's fine. You know how they have just those bays?
Yeah,
So without a garage door, that's acceptable?
I know.
Okay.
All right.
Here, maybe the pictures will explain.
I didn't get as many as I planned to, but we'll have more next time. Because I could show you bad
Say,
pictures.
I don't know, 40 feet wide, and you said 8, like you want to be able to get
I know.
So, out of transparency, the ones that I'm sharing with you here are ones that Paul has shared with me as an example of, this is a duplex unit. So here's one, which I'm now learning is allowed. So these are single car garages. And again, as I've shared there, if you are starting to talk about tools, and you're like, okay, what is the issue? Is the setback not an issue, but it's just about massing of the garages? Again, there are tools, there are some places that say, for example, that your garage can be at the same plane as long as you have other things that are in that plane, like a porch, other elements. Or you can have that garage as long as it doesn't take up more than, it's not more than 50% of that facade, so that you still have mostly living space in that 50%. Or windows have to exceed more than the size of your garage, so it's living space plus the windows. So there are other tools. We can get into what the specifics of those would be at a later time. Here's some more. So there's a row of townhouses. They're pretty much the same as what you just saw, but with more of them.
There is a difference at the end. This one shows elevated porch areas, the other one is at grade.
Thank you.
Those fit the form-based code now?
If-
No.
No,
you know,
right?
If it was enclosed, like if that porch area was a building
Yeah,
with a door, which is what we did propose on our plan for now, that's 8 feet out from the building, from the garage,
yep,
I just don't think it's as nice looking, actually.
Yep.
But
Are these 8 feet out?
I don't know if those are 8 feet out. That's a perspective I just found online, so.
Yeah.
I don't think those aren't eight. They're more like 6.
And the more it comes out, the more ugly it gets, in my opinion, too. So,
Mhm.
just,
Wait, why doesn't this fit the form base?
So again, right now, our current standard says that if you have a garage, so let's look at the entirety of this building.
Mm-hmm.
This garage portion, the street-facing garage,
8 feet.
has to be set back 8 feet behind the principal plane. So again, the principal plane is not where this porch projects, it's where that door is. That's your principal plane. So where that window is here, can you see
Oh.
my cursor?
Yeah.
That's the principal plane of your building.
Mm-hmm.
So your garage has to be set back 8 feet from that under the current code. So the question to you is, again, what would your goal be in relation to garages on these, I don't call them urban, but not suburban streets? And is this the tool? What is the right tool to achieve that? And an argument is being presented to you that the 8-foot setback as written is not the right tool. So my question to you is always, let's start with the goal. Always, 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 what is your goal? And then we'll find the right tool.
So this would be, say that was 8 feet out, it was a fully enclosed sunroom, that would change the face of the building, or no?
So what this would do, so basically what this would do is say, so one option that you could have here is to say, this is actually a combination of tools you could use. Your tool could be that you are measuring from not the principal plane of the building, again, where that, my cursor is there, but that a porch of substantial size, and you would define what that is, that you would measure from the front of that. So again, this is a substantial porch. This is not just a little stoop where you've got a few steps coming out. This is a substantial structure. And so you would measure from here backwards so that you're still projecting in front of that garage, and that you would find a number. I don't know if it's 8 or a different number. And you would measure back from that. So that's one option. The other thing that's happening here is to say that the garage is still not the dominant feature. If you look at the whole of that garage takes up about 25% of that unit's face. It's a 2-story building, 2.5. So it's taking up about, well, it's even 20%. So some people look at it, some codes look at it holistically and say a garage cannot take up more than X% of the whole facade. Some might say they're just looking at the first floor, which is much more common because you don't want a whole line of nothing but garages on your first floor, and say that they cannot take up more than X%. 40 is a pretty common number. More than 40% of your first floor. And so this would achieve that, maybe. I don't have numbers, but possibly. So there's a lot of things being demonstrated here. You could hate them all, I don't know.
Can you explain, you asked what's the point of the 8 feet back? You want us to discuss why?
No, what I want you to discuss is, again, what do you want to see in multi-unit development, residential development in your growth center, in your urban area? I keep saying urban, semi-urban area.
Can I just clarify? So when you say semi-urban, is that a B and a C street?
That's
or
your
do-
C street within your growth center, your most urban area in town.
Okay. But the A is the most urban?
Yeah, so these wouldn't be allowed there at all.
Right, okay. Just trying to clarify.
Yeah, so I'm talking relatively within the community. It may be the lowest within the growth center, within the code, but it's still higher than elsewhere in town. You may say, we love garages, put them everywhere. You may say,
Right.
we don't like them at all. You may say, I don't see the problem.
So you
Remember-
like the walkability in the community? So for me personally, when I look at something like this, what I see is functionality, because you got the garage and you have your car and you're traveling, chances are unlikely you're working there, you're hauling out somewhere. You come home though, you can be out on your porch, your
Right.
stoop, and you
And
have
there's a
people walking
sidewalk.
by, which adds your social aspect, so you get a little more community.
Yep, no.
Because I think that's what we're missing a lot
Yep,
that we wanted.
I agree.
I think when people envisioned the growth center, they thought they were going to have more interaction than what we're getting.
opportunities.
Correct.
for Interaction, yeah.
Yeah,
But then again, when I look at function, we live, right now, I don't know where we're headed in the future, but right now we have winter, and I would take a garage over almost anything in a place that I was going to live, and because of the function of it,
Right.
in terms of my car and, maintenance and not keeping it outside and stuff like that. So it's this tug of, to me, function
Yeah, and
and,
again, this doesn't say they're not allowed, it's just they're not, if they're front, it's what are the rules if they're front facing?
yeah. Are there any developments like in Chittenden County that if I wanted to drive
Yeah.
around and look at kind of different,
Yeah, one of the ones we talked about before, I actually found this one, I thought this was cool. This is the coolest case it front-facing garage I've ever seen. That's a garage. These are garage doors.
Do you
I've
go
no
down?
idea what this is. I've never seen anything like this. Yeah,
You go down?
you go down.
Looks a little dangerous to me.
That is so interesting. I was
It's-
wondering
it-
if you could
I'm not
go
saying it
down.
could ever
What's
happen
the
here.
slope there?
I don't know. I just think that.
That is very cool.
What I would show you, we talked about before, I think we talked about this before. Again, I'm not trying to lead you down any particular path, but we talked about,
Does that say syphilis in Florida?
we talked about Zephyr in Williston.
It's something about syphilis in Florida. The first thing that came up when we dropped down.
No, it's not what I meant to do.
Because I really don't like myself Burlington, so Williston.
With the garages?
Just the amount of growth, it just is like, it just looks not well thought
Anyway.
out to me.
I feel like I'm maybe getting a little too deep
And
on this one.
we can wait until the other members are here.
Yeah.
They probably want to see it too.
But just, if you're starting to, sort of drive around and see like, I think as a whole, get yourself out to Finney Crossing in Williston. You see a lot of different things, good and less interesting, going on out there. Some you might love, some you might hate, some you might be like, Sorry. You guys are having to watch me. But I'll show you this real quick.
Thank you.
There's definitely, and some of the things that you need to consider, I'll stand here and talk to you all day about design considerations, but what you'll hear from others are, what are the practical considerations of rear loading. So these all have garages. They're just not on the street. So what are the alternatives
Interesting.
to not having, so they're a different streetscape. It's a different environment. You may say not necessarily better, I'm just saying different.
So they go in the rear?
Yeah, so you can do can't necessarily drive by the, so they're all rear loaded. There's an alley back here. This is that same,
Interesting.
these are their garages. I think they're even two-car garages. No,
And those you end up with no yard at all. No
No
back
yard.
end, no nothing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Mhm, So
yeah,
that's
see, this
the,
is
That's
the
your front end and-
garage. This
yeah.
is as close as I can show you. This
Yeah.
is the garage itself
yeah,
for that unit,
yeah.
so.
So they're all like one big garage that's not attached to the building itself?
They're attached, they are attached.
They are, so you can walk through to get to your,
Yeah. It's hard to see. I don't know if you can get over there. You can see. But there's a whole assortment of different things going on in this area. I think that's why I always recommend it to people, because you will see 45 different
Me
things
too.
going on over there.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would say for homework on this one is to start to feel out, what do you want these C streets to feel like? How do you feel about these garages? I do happen to actually agree that an 8-foot setback doesn't achieve much. If the goal is to not have dominant garages, it's not the right tool.
I agree.
I just don't think it achieves it, and it requires you to have, it's not it requires you to do this weird offset within the structure and design of your building. as
Which
you
kind of
build
looks
it.
weird itself.
It's not just the way it looks, it's also how you're building it.
Yeah.
And I think it adds a lot of cost. That's unnecessary. So, but I would want to hear from you guys what you want to have, what kind of visual you would want to have, and then we'll pick the right.
Yeah. I just, it'd be helpful for me to see, a few examples, because eventually something I'll see that I keep liking. I don't have any of those images in my head. I just don't look at buildings that way. So again, this is really helpful to look at different options, for a garage.
You could ride through Finney Crossings, you'll have a lot of options,
Okay.
for sure.
Yep, no, I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, I would definitely get over there.
Okay.
The other thing all right, Zach sort of dared me, so I'm going to throw it out to you. I was surprised to just hear just now that single-family homes, are sort of allowed in this area, so I'd give that some thought too.
Did you want to make a comment, Paul?
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
No, it's a discussion.
So, this is our planning and development project here.
That's Heath,
And we
developer
have
for
593 units proposed.
Smith.
Only 21 of the units, these right here on a C Street, which is a secondary street, it's not even a public road, it's a private road that kind of comes off. So you see these beautiful quad buildings first with the porches, and then back behind, we're just trying to facilitate the market by having some garage-type units. And we have wetlands back here in back. So we have that wetland buffer, and we do have our state wetlands approved. So what I'd like to say is that when you have a form-based code like this with 3 or more townhouse-type units, you don't have the option of going on the side. You have front or the back. And we don't have the back because we've got the wetlands. What we've done back there, though, is provide the multi-use path, and when you talk about gathering, we have a looped system where all the pedestrians can go, and that's in the back. And so we're providing that activity, but our only option is in the front. So I just want to throw that out there. We don't have a lot of these buildings.
Yep.
We have 21 out of the 593 units.
There's
And
this.
they are on a back secondary C Street, right? We have B Streets and the A Street, which we also, it's another good topic that was brought up, that we can't build off of either and bring the big buildings up front because of the topography and the drop into the site.
Right.
Plus, you've got V-Trans issues, right? You've got throughput and fast cars, and that's not a pedestrian environment. So that's a great, another discussion to talk about A Streets here. So we see, instead of the 4 corners, having this cross-section of Severance Road and Route 7 being predominantly your A Street and where you want the pedestrian activity, instead of that cross, think of it as a square and connect the 4 corners of your development, and in the internal part, create this pedestrian environment that you're looking to have. So that's what I'd like to say on that.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Just one other, with the 8-foot setback, just from a constructor's standpoint. In many of these units, these smaller units, you go into your garage, you get out of your car, you walk to the front of the car, you go through a door, and you're in the mudroom. If you have a house or a unit like this with an 8-foot setback, it precludes you from essentially having the mudroom. The mudroom is that 8 feet, right? So if the setback was much smaller, then you still have room in the body of the entire structure to have that mudroom or entering area in the back side of the garage. So the 8-foot setback makes it really difficult to be able to do that. You have to offset that entire quadrant by 8 feet. It just becomes very complicated architectural from a constructor standpoint.
And what would you do in that area? Like if you did build something and you had an 8, what would, it would seem disjointed to me.
Form-based room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question?
From
Yep,
a
absolutely.
constructor standpoint, it's not.
Yeah.
So we then, to get around it, you can put these very large, absurdly large porches on the front of the building to try and get your front facing, and then so you can get your setback, so it does technically meet, but it's not, it's not that full 8-foot setback from the predominant plane. So there's some workarounds.
Yeah.
But I don't know that those workarounds that technically conform is what's intended.
So,
Can I hold up? Before we
Here's
get
an
any
example.
further, can you state your name for me for the record?
Yeah, my name is Matt Zamborano.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
here's your 8-foot setback. I'm guessing. Here's your garage,
Yep.
here's your principal plane.
Yeah, that was pretty close.
So as you see, the only option as you're exiting that garage is probably at the back there, and there's only one entrance into your house.
And that wouldn't have a mudroom. You wouldn't be able to have a mudroom there.
No.
Yeah.
I love
Does
the
that look
mudroom.
much different
I don't think it's prettier, or
if that garage?
is the point to make sure that there's like a driveway, so you could have a car in the garage and a car in the driveway? Is that the,
Yeah, can you go over to the one with the 3 cars?
Oh, I was gonna, yeah, I was definitely getting to that one.
I was gonna say, that might help Wendy.
okay.
Yeah. So this, I guess I would take a look at this blue one especially and ask yourself, how does it, I guess, and this is a single family home, so it may feel a little different, but how does it feel if this blue garage comes up and is level with where this downspout is? Does it feel much different to you is the question.
Just if there's more driveway.
It
Yeah.
does give you more driveway by pushing it back.
If you had 2 cars. But could you go back 4 feet?
But I'm guessing that's not the purpose of the code, to give you more driveway. Okay, but let me show you.
Okay, yeah, that's ugly. Okay.
I think we know how you feel about dominant garage
No,
design.
no.
So that is 90% of the first floor
Yeah, that's
consumed by
really
garage.
ugly. Or I don't, in my taste.
I agree. That's horrendous.
So, there's a
So
couple
we're
of them. I told you,
looking
go
for
over
something
there, you'll see
between those
everything.
two.
Well, it's good, it's like,
Yeah.
that, we all agree,
Absolutely.
that is a,
You'll see
in
some
terms
stuff
of
you
our
love and
taste.
some stuff you hate, and
Yep.
That 8-foot thing, though, looks like an afterthought. It doesn't look like it's part of the plan itself of building a house.
I don't think it was in their code. They didn't have a form-based code at the
Well,
time
in
these
this
were built.
case, they're getting the front face of the house very close to the sidewalk.
Okay.
So if you were to have the garage door much closer, there's no room to park
Yeah.
the car in front of the garage without it being across the sidewalk.
Right.
So they kind of have to do it here.
That was
Okay.
very functional.
That's a functional thing in this picture, but if you were to set the entire house back slightly more and then brought the, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a functional piece in these examples.
Yeah, I like
Otherwise, you
that
park
one. Do you
across
like
the
that one?
sidewalk.
I like that yellow one.
More garages. I'm told actually though, that those don't all belong to that unit. That's what I'm told. They're actually used by some of the ones across the street.
That is absolutely right.
Is it?
Yes,
I was
absolutely.
the same.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh, my
that's absolutely
Lord.
correct. I asked that when I was down there.
Where is this?
Is there
Where are we?
triplexes or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, so it's
Oh,
like the
this is
garage for the building
Williston.
is across the street.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
That's a good
I
question.
don't know. That's just what I'm told. I don't.
So they Airbnb their garage space?
Right?
So, there's plenty of examples right here in Vermont for us to look at.
There really are.
Horizontal
I'm gonna drive
building
around
breaks
there.
back into those.
Go on a road trip.
Yeah,
Okay, so is that enough to get you guys thinking?
Yep.
for sure.
Okay. Again, we'll get to tools later. Just think about what you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is
Okay.
it safe to assume that we want to be able to have 2 cars, like one in the garage and one in the driveway? Is that safe? Is that, can we start with some assumptions that we all agree with?
I don't think anything's.
I think that's the norm.
I think that's up to you guys. Again, I would say that you need to tell me, because what you feel may not
Right.
be anywhere close to what I feel.
Right.
So can I ask?
So you
are
can
You
eliminate,
guys here tonight because of that 8-foot thing, is that?
We're here for
Multiple reasons.
Okay.
But Paul has had to use the existing form-based code to design this entire
Okay.
project. And it's taken a very long time and a lot of gymnastics.
Yeah.
And I'm a constructor, and so from a practical standpoint, there's just some things that, you know, from a construction standpoint, don't make a lot of sense, or are just make very difficult and costly
Sure.
construction. And the parking, just to reference what you were saying about the parking, something to consider is a lot of these streets in this code area, you're not allowed to park on the street. So if you don't have at least 2 spaces, like one in the garage and one, you know, in the driveway, that's difficult.
That's a problem.
So those houses that you're speaking of,
this
yeah,
row right
they're
here.
far enough behind the road that you could have the garage flush and place for another place to park?
Yes, and we are showing, I put cars on the plane here, so.
Okay.
Yep, there's plenty enough room for, most of these have one car, room enough for one car
In the driveway?
in the driveway.
Okay.
So presuming you could have one, if you were a 2-car family, you
Mhm.
could have one in the garage, one in the driveway,
Gotcha.
because you can't.
So,
and you,
I do want to correct a little bit, because we're proposing a private C Street drive, we have perpendicular parking off of that. It's kind of like a parking lot, but those lots are serving the quad buildings, which are in our application, if you want to pull it up, to take a look at.
Well,
what
no,
those
we
look
do have to be very careful
Yeah.
because you have an open
like.
project to
Yeah.
not talk
On that.
specifically.
Oh,
Okay.
So, even
about
though we
these
know
lots?
you're talking specifically, talk vaguely.
we definitely have the idea of them, that helps.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
thought is, your public road is further away anyway.
Right.
So those will become public. The C Street on our project for, at least, is more, where these townhouses are, is a pull-off,
Yeah.
off that public
Yep.
road. And there's a lot of beautiful architecture, you know, from the B Street all the way back to C Street
Yep.
to these townhouses.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess just one more thought I want to leave you guys with as we talk about these holistically is that to please remember, and this is something that I'd read when I went back and looked at some of the history back in, you know, when the code was written and the growth center was applied for, is just to remember that this is very valuable taxable land. There is wastewater here, which cannot be said about most of the rest of the land in the community. There are very few natural resources, so this is intended to be a growth area, and we do want to make sure that this is an area that has a strong return for the tax base, that has a strong return for people being able to live there, and that is being used as it's intended in that way, and not just being used as pavement or parking lots, and that it is contributing again to that tax base, to the commercial base, to doing all of those things, because it does have such high value for those things. So, and I know that the select board talks about that quite often when they talk about the value of that land. So just keep that in mind too, that it's very intentionally not a suburban area. And I'm not saying at all that that's what this plan demonstrates, but just, you know, we're not trying to replicate a typical suburban neighborhood, and we want to keep in mind that this is meant to be denser, tighter, different. And so it's going to have a different code, and it's not going to be treated like Edgewood or any of those other neighborhoods.
Yep. Perfect. Want to move on to A, or?
The only thing I want to say is I feel like I can't make an informed decision because I feel like I don't know anything about this. You know what I mean? I feel like you're asking me to, you know, give you direction and.
No, this is only phase 1.
Okay, I'm just.
Still lots of time.
Yeah,
I
it'll
know,
take
but
some time to work your way
Can we-
through
Is there
this.
any way we can get someone to come in and present something about, in the big picture, like, how do you get, a project like this that's cohesive, that is functional and cohesive and fits in the community? I don't know who that would be, but if I could just get a little bit more background information about how to think about this, I would find it really helpful. I mean, maybe that's just me, and I know you've been on the planning commission, so.
It definitely takes time.
It takes time, yeah.
And here's a good
And I'd be
example.
glad to read, I'd be glad to
Yeah.
do some tutorials or something, but I don't know how to make an informed decision about this.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to help you out with some resources and such, and I defer a lot to you guys, not because I don't know how to write code, I can write code all day long, but because I want to make sure that what you ultimately have represents you as a unique community, and that it represents you, Colchester, and not me, Kathy LaRose. And that's really important.
Yeah.
And so when I ask a lot of questions of you, that's what I'm trying to do.
We can come up with a
I could
general
write something.
idea.
Yeah, very
Staff can,
general.
that's
Yeah.
okay, because we know what, we hope we know what the town would like. And this form-based code was definitely built to be user-friendly for the developers, and also with a vision what the original planning commission wanted.
Okay,
And so we don't need really all the nuts and bolts, how to put the thing together. And
Okay.
actually, staff can
Yeah.
help us out with that, but we really want more of the policy style.
I could write what I want, but
Yeah, and I think as it goes on, and you wrap your head more around, and Paul's a good example tonight of being able to show us all the details,
Right.
inch by inch,
Like
you'll
even
get your
that little
flavor
thing. Yep,
of what we're thinking.
yep.
And then, as Kathy builds it, we'll say yes or no. I think that's how I started. I started way back at the beginning of this thing, and it's amazed me that I'm seeing this on paper now. Now we see buildings out there, but the first three buildings do not look what I envisioned, but now that I think about what we were talking about, it's closer to what we envisioned, I think. Little tweaking doesn't hurt, though.
yeah, and we can go back to a lot more pictures too. I
Yeah.
can put a
Yeah.
lot up, and you can say, I like this, and I can ask you to tell me why, and I can, if you tell
That
me
would
no,
be
and
really
I,
helpful.
and we'll dig into the whys,
Yeah, And also for you to say, this is what I'd like you to be thinking about, or just thinking about, or, just in terms of this is the function, but this is the look. That would help me a lot.
Yeah. We'll do more visuals.
Yep.
I think it is helpful, and
I agree.
Okay.
You definitely know what you don't like, right, Wendy?
Right. I know what
Right.
I don't like.
yeah, that's always easier.
Yeah.
So I'll bring more ugly examples next time.
Thank you.
We know ugly. We want to see pretty.
Okay.
The Colchester too, like we were saying, like what kind of reflects kind of Colchester.
Right. Yep. So try A Street on us?
All right.
All right.
Where are we at? A Streets. Yes, so this one, folks from ST Ireland are not here, but, so let's talk about A Streets, particularly Blakely Road, Severance Road. So where we are most likely to see buildings along A Street are most likely to be not close up at that intersection, not where the lights, the signalized intersection is. They're likely to be where the traffic is still flowing. Potentially on Roosevelt Highway as you're coming up or down the hill, where that new entrance was sort of put in. Potentially along Severance Road, where the entrances are to the new Sunderland Woods development. There's areas there for new development there. And so, remember when I talked about A Streets, B Streets, C Streets? So that's an A Street. A Streets require taller buildings, and they require you to be close to the road. So when I say close to the road, I'm talking 0 to 18 feet. Oh, we could have used this as an exercise to measure out. We missed an opportunity of electrical tape use.
Next time.
Next time. So, we'd love to
was gonna
put
bring a tape
electrical
measure
tape out. So 0 to 18 feet, 0 feet. So you can go as close to 0 foot to a setback in the form-based code. That means you can be right on top of the right-of-way line, like literally at it,
Wow.
with
But
no
would there be a
separation.
could there be a sidewalk?
It depends, if the sidewalk's in the public right-of-way, if the town agrees to putting it into the public right-of-way, which sometimes they are, often they are. But you can be at the 0 foot, but you have to be within 18 feet, as the code is written today. You cannot be beyond 18 feet. Now, 18 feet is actually not a lot.
No.
To help you visualize that, you can look out at a parking space right now. That is 18 feet long. That is where you parked your vehicle tonight. The end of those yellow lines is 18 feet. Your building, that is now 5 stories tall, has to be that far away from zoom, zoom, zoom. And so this was brought to us as, is this really what you want? Do you really want our building to be 18 feet from the zoom, zoom, zoom? And I said, well, I didn't write it. I'll go find out. But if it's not what you intend, to be 18 feet off of, again, not the stop signs. This is where the traffic is still flowing. What is the right number? And what do you want that space to look like? Because I don't think what you want is a parking lot. Educated guess. In that space between the road and that building. And so what does that look like? So pictures, back to pictures.
Is this
Any
like,
good.
where on the first floor it needs to be commercial?
It would need to be commercial.
Yep.
Yep. And it could be 3 to 5 stories as drafted now.
Up to 6
6.
with affordable housing.
Oh, with affordable housing, 6 stories.
Yes, that's
Yeah, that's
right.
Again, 18 feet, not very
Right.
far.
But is
Yeah,
it
we
just
are-
the first floor that needs to be commercial? Could it be then 5?
You could have
Yeah.
more than just the first floor.
You
But the
could.
first floor has to be commercial.
Okay.
No waiving.
And McGillicuddy's is a good example.
100%.
McGillicuddy's is a good example
Yeah,
of
yeah,
distance, so you're probably 60 feet, I would guess,
That's 100%.
or so,
Yeah, and no,
without parking.
no option for conditional
And a
use.
walkway.
Okay, gotcha.
Green,
Yeah. So we talked this through.
Interesting.
We said, okay. If it's not 18 feet, what is potentially the right number? And if it's further, again, what's going to exist in that space? Can't imagine. I would recommend to you dead space. Definitely am not going to recommend to you parking. Not going to recommend to you paved space that doesn't have anything in it. So we talked through this and some pictures. And even if you have 18 feet that's treated, and some people are doing this, bear with me, it's actually, even where you have commercial uses, it doesn't provide a lot of space. So here's Park Street, even over here. This is Five Corners. And my favorite bakery outside of Colchester.
Oh, did you see they're having one of those midnight, Insomnia Donuts is coming to Vermont. It wasn't that your place? Wasn't there a donut place when you showed us when you went to college? There was
Oh,
a,
yes.
no, Insomnia
Yes.
Cookies is what it's
Yes.
called.
Yeah, that's in stores.
Yeah,
Very good memory, Wendy.
sometimes.
So this is actually more than 18 feet. I can't remember what number I came up with, but I measured this out.
What's
So this
that
is-
cement thing? Is that like
So it's like a
intentional?
retaining, they had a grade change here. So it's kind of like a retaining wall, but it sort of
It's kinda
functions
hybrid.
as a way to manage the grade change.
It stopped cars from plowing into the
They
building, too.
don't have underground parking here, but they have sort of slightly below grade parking in the back. So this is dealing with slightly more than 20 feet. And still, in order to get people passing here and passing here, the most that like
The way
this
that looks.
bakery
Feedback.
could do are tiny little bistro tables. They're adorable, they're pink, but they're tiny. Because there's just no room to get by with anything bigger. And they could only do like planter landscaping. They couldn't actually even install real landscaping. And this is not far off of an intersection. So this is still low speed here. Not the least of which is because it's 5 corners and everything is low speed.
But the
So-
space between the wall and the road, that seems like dead space, like, what do you,
This here,
yeah,
yeah, I don't think there's much you could do about that. You have utilities here.
yeah. But if that cement wall wasn't there, that would,
It goes up. That's not,
that
that,
you need a wall there?
it goes up. That doesn't show it right.
Yeah, that's to manage
That's-
the elevation change. This is higher. There's steps here.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I know it does. It looks like there's, no,
Yeah.
it goes up.
Yeah, okay.
So you're like on a
Yeah,
patio.
I can see it now.
Yeah.
I can see
Is that
the
better?
steps.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a
Still
few
doesn't
steps
look
here.
good,
So that block, that gave you space away from the road.
but- Yeah,
But like Kathy says, look how tiny it is for,
Just
if you
looks
want commercial down, you
So
only
they
have a
did a
couple.
nice job with the building, but
Yeah.
the space around it is still,
right. That looks weird to me.
so, you know,
I don't know
here's,
what you would do
I
instead.
don't think that this is what we want to have right there. Again, and we're gonna have speeds that are twice what's happening here with the vehicles going by. It's not slow speed, it's not stopping, it's not people turning in, it's probably not gonna be a lot of walkers. This is an area where there's a lot of pedestrians. We're not gonna be seeing that same thing on Severance Road. If people are walking, it's people who are living there, eventually shopping there, but it's not anybody outside of that development like you would see here. Sorry, let me get back to the images. So I started to look at, okay, what does it look like to have something other? And I actually struggled to find good examples, but I did find a few. Here's sort of a greener example, where I presume there's a road right here, a busier road, pretend that there is. They've got sort of a walkway. This is a lot of elevation change, so you're gonna have to pretend. But they filled it with sort of like their top lot in the front. Not sure that's the right thing for Severance Road, but it's an example of something.
That's like a moat.
What is that?
I don't know.
What is that?
Is that a moat?
This here, I think it's actually I think top left, it's not. I think it's like it's one of those fitness like parks.
Oh, okay.
Like if you're working out, like,
Was it like a water feature?
Yeah, it does. But
yeah. It's just something that I'm seeing
I
some
like
space.
the
Not the
wide,
best example.
I like
told
the
you it was
wide
hard.
sidewalks.
Yeah,
like
I do too.
What else did I find? Here's one. No, that's not it. This one's slightly more than 20. This is actually Shelburne Road, South Burlington.
Try to get my hair cut.
But even they, because of a grade change, aren't using their space well. So they, even though there's a restaurant at the end there, they don't have anything out in the front. That's that Blissby restaurant. So they're slightly over 20 when I measured it, but I don't know where the right-of-way actually is. It probably is just beyond these trees and lights. It's a beautiful building. But it's, again, still pretty close. And they have a light right there. So, again, what's gonna be asked of you is, you know, can something, where's the last one? Are you open to considering pushing that 18 feet on an A Street back? And if so, start to consider what you would wanna see in that space. So what you can't see here is there is a street just off view. And what they did, this is probably the best example. What they
I
did
like
here
that. I
is
do
some park
too.
benches, some green space, some brown gravel space, but some trees before they did the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-story building.
How far back do you think that is roughly?
I don't know, that's a good question. That's probably close to
40?
You're asking the wrong person. That's more than 40, I would say.
Yeah, Manchester, New Hampshire redesigned their downtown, and they made 50-foot setbacks.
50 foot.
And it looks
50?
very similar to that, very similar to
I
that.
do
It's real-
like that.
Yeah, it's a whole scapes and thing. It's got benches, and you've got pop-outs for the shops, and,
You know, so could
that-
you see something like this along Severance Road? You know, this sort of setback, pretending you're at the road here, as opposed to that building sitting right on the road.
yeah.
So, food for thought.
Mhm.
Or you might just want that building right there. I'm not telling you not to.
Yeah.
So that's the concern that was raised.
It's a good concern.
Our electric is very quiet.
What is?
Not a lot of great examples.
So,
Yeah.
Most buildings are really right up next to the road.
Pretty
Yeah.
quiet.
It's hard to find examples where they're not.
So,
Huh.
I think 20 or 30 years, 40 years.
True.
So,
In Salt Lake City, there's a whole area that's newer construction, looks a lot like this, and setback, I bet you, is like 35 to 40 feet. And there's no green space, but it allows for, it's all still brick, like a massive sidewalk. It allows for bars and restaurants to have outdoor space.
Yep.
And there's still plenty of space to just walk through.
Mm-hmm.
so just really wide
It's
sidewalks.
just a really, really wide sidewalk essentially. But,
Yeah.
you know, I was there, it was warm weather, so there was, you know, removable barriers or very temporary barriers put out, and, you know, tables and chairs and umbrellas and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
In front of a couple of different restaurants.
But it'd be a lot quieter with EVs, right? I mean, if all cars were EVs, it'd be at least quieter. The sound would be not, you wouldn't hear a lot of traffic.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Could I add to, I guess, our personal situation here at Four Corners, and that's that we've got, I mean, a lot of the examples you're gonna see are these flat site examples, you know, I mean, on my other hat as a landscape architect, I worked on the Trader Joe's project, back when Kathy was over in South Bend, and we worked together on pushing the building back, so Pier 1, that site's perfect. We did the plaza and all that, and it turned out great. But this site, here, like for our corner at least, there's a big topography change on Route 7. We had to choose, especially with the wetlands, conflict, do you do A Street or the B Street inside? We had to choose one or the other. You can't. It's huge, massive.
Are you in the northeast quadrant?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other, our Severance Road, where it's not V-Trans, unfortunately, it's cut, well, we're cut off with the Cirque Highway piece. So we can't build out that. We had to get an easement over that
To
piece.
get
So
across.
there's nothing, we don't own that land. So it's not, there's nothing we can do there. So, and then as you go south from, you know, Four Corners, it drops in grade a lot as well.
Yep.
So just keep in mind, I guess, the natural topography and, you know, those items
And
too.
and natural resources may
Right.
impact
How that,
your ability to do some of this, some of these things.
Okay,
All right,
should we move on?
shall we move on?
Yeah.
All right. Bay standards, okay. This one comes largely from the DRB, although also from people who tried to build a building. So we have bay standards, so those of you who are learning FBC for the first time, we have a code. Zach, you wanna talk bay standards?
Where's that? It's like, from the spot.
Let me just get to the right page.
I mean, I
So-
have to spend days preparing it.
Of course you do.
So for buildings that I believe that exceed 60 feet in width, we require that they be divided into bays. In a bay, the depth between the two of them, there's a graphic on it's on page 49 that I'm looking at. So anyway, the depth step back or step forward in a building needs to be 4 feet minimum. And the bay width, you know, the minimum width is 20 feet, the maximum width is 60 feet. So for these longer buildings, there's sort of a, you know, a real step forward or back that should be done at least once or sometimes twice for the length of the building. And we've seen some of the larger buildings at Severance Corners are, need to comply with this standard. So thinking of the ones you see actually at in Sunderland, the three that are there presently all had to conform to this standard, and they're clearer about that. The Severance Corners Village Center, some of that predated some of the form-based code, just getting site plan approval in the early 2000s. So you didn't see that sort of architectural standard at that time, but you are seeing it now. So again, that is Bays. And the Development Review Board, there's not a lot of language here. So whether or not a porch or a deck can exist within the bay, that's a question. And then also, I think there's some questions about if the commission is liking what they're seeing with this sort of building design.
Yeah. So as I put in my memo, nearly every form-based code, whether it's a really intricate traditional code or whether it's the lightest code, has something that says you should break up a horizontal mass of a building. So you don't have the old traditional schoolhouse building where you just have a long building with nothing that breaks it up. Because remember when we did that exercise and I said, what do you like, what do you don't like? Universally, you guys hated any building where you had this long expansive building. So presumably, what the bays are trying to do is to break up that massing across the horizontal span of that building. And they're trying to do it as a twofer. We're gonna break it up by going this way and this way. And I'm not sure it's successful. So, because it also requires you to step that building back at least 4 feet for a length of 20 feet. So, again, keep in mind, you're not just talking about a visual cue, you're actually changing the structure you're building. So anybody, when you're building buildings and you're trying to, not a builder, but I've heard this a lot, you're trying to save costs, a lot of zigging and zagging is going to add a lot of costs. Square buildings, change the facade, easier. So when you're having to step that back 4 feet, you're making a lot of adjustments. These bays are required to step back at least 4 feet, and not just for a little bit. You're not just going back, putting in a little carve out or egress, we might call it, and then coming back and continuing that. You have to do that for at least 20 feet, but no more than 60, and then you gotta come back. Or go back further again. And that's what a bay is. As written. So again, I'm not sure it's achieving that goal of breaking up that mass in a way that different tools could do better, easier, simpler, probably more affordable, and probably with a better visual appearance. There's a lot of options, and this one's going to be tough, mostly because the menu of options is really extensive. And I'm hoping that when we have Rebecca back, she'll weigh in a lot. I think the request from those who are building in the area is just, please get rid of that depth standard. If you don't make it really complicated, we'll do whatever it is you ask of us, but that depth thing is really wonky. Especially because of this 20 to 60 foot thing.
And I'll also add that numerous lots are fronting along roads that aren't straight. They might be curving. So there's actually a situation, and I can get really into the details if you want, or I can spare you them. But the road, there's a segment of road in Sunderland that curves away from one building, and the building bay is stepping back away from it, so it gets dangerously close to that 18 feet or so And they'd had to really think critically about like, oh geez, how do we design this part of the building to counteract the fact that the property line was going one direction and the building was going the other. So there's definitely some considerations when you start adding up the 4 feet over a long span.
So my proposal to you will probably be to create a menu of options that are things that break up a horizontal facade, whether it be from materials to colors to a depth shift might be one of them, whether it be egress or a protrusion. Those could be one of the things chosen that would break that up. And allow those to sort of serve as a menu of options that would break up that expanse. And you would define them so that they're not just like, oh, we put in one vertical line of bricks and a line of other colored bricks, and so therefore we did it. So you'd have some standards that were specific about it, but I'm not sure the base standard is accomplishing the breakup
No.
successfully. And so you do have, in the realm of pictures, you end up with you get this long expanse because it has to be at least 20 feet. My guess is this probably hit exactly 20. Or
That's weird.
it's bigger than 20. And then it had to shift back.
I think this one was, this one technically, I believe, has 2 bays, or 3 bays. So there's the bay on the left side, the one you're looking at, and the one on the right side, which is the minimum number of bays that would be allowed for a building of this width.
We have, again, we got a lot of jogging in and out. So this building is sort of wavy to sort of meet that standard.
That's where it gets really expensive, is that deepness of it. If you go back to your other image where we were talking about the front setback, it looked like there was a building that was just a 2-foot setback. You still have the bays, but,
Which one?
not as good. Yep, that image there. See, there's only a couple feet you can see between the
Yeah,
next.
here?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's still, I mean, I think there's ways to still architecturally do this, so.
And then that's got a roof line change too, which helps
Yeah.
define a parapet that's higher on that one
Yeah,
section.
roof line changes are common options to have different,
Although you got the 4 foot on the right side.
so there's, and I would argue that this is a nicer looking building than just one.
Is it nice looking?
I think this
Yeah.
is beautiful.
That's where I get my hair cut.
Nice building. So this doesn't have necessarily those breakups, but it's not, but there's a lot happening that breaks up the horizontal span. These aren't necessarily material changes, but because the windows are so wide, they feel like they're columns almost. And again, you've got that roof line change.
I like that roof line. right
Which
there.
helps.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And then just the other example here, right here in Colchester, this is that building. So you've got, again, and I'm not saying this makes it an unattractive building, but I know it made it a challenging building to approve, and it made it a challenging building to build, probably added costs. So you've got these recesses here with all of these bays. And there's a lot of horizontal change going here. You've got color changes, material changes, you've got depth changes, you've got roof line changes. Yeah, this is taller than this. Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Do you know how many units, living units, when it's built out, how many units there will be for housing or for people to live? Because that's really important to me.
Where?
In all of Seven's Corners.
I do, I don't have it with me.
Okay, just at some point. 'cause
We have a
that-
guess, anyway.
It's really, we really need housing, so that's really important. I mean, how things look are important, but getting people, to me, with a roof over their head is
To
important.
hold on to that thought, because one of the things that we'll talk about is, so this building in particular, while I have it up, is on the corner of a B street and a C street, and because of that, the C street had to take precedence, and a C street is limited to 3 stories. And so therefore, this entire building, even though it is on a B street, was limited to 3 stories. I'm pretty sure they would have put a 4th story on if they could have.
Yes.
And I think it would have been quite attractive, and it would have added more units without expanding outwards. And so that is another fault in our code that we probably just didn't know. So it is on a B street, it was intended to have 4 stories, but that side street prevailed.
Interesting.
Okay. So that is that issue with bays. And again, I know Rebecca's really interested in this one. She's gonna have a lot of thoughts to share when she's with us. So potential alternatives, again, there's a lot of different things. I list them here. Significant material or color change. Some codes specifically say no color change. Horizontal plane shift, bump out setbacks, building height variation, projecting elements. You could also just change the size of what that looks like instead of 60 feet. Some codes will say you can't have any continuous span greater than X feet. So rather than say minimum of 20, no more than 60, you could say you must have a break every 20 feet, 18 feet, 24 feet, 32 feet, something like that. So these are all things you could start to consider. And you don't have to have the same requirement for every street. You could change it based on different streets. So, good for that. Shall we move on?
Yep.
Okay. This one I think is a very simple problem to put in front of you. And then you can kick it back to us because I think it's more of a technical fix than it is a policy shift. So Sarita, you like this one? Accessory structures. So this one's actually not just in our form-based code, although I think the real problem arises because of the form-based code. So accessory structures are exactly what they sound like. They are accessory to another structure, which means that they have to have a principal structure that goes with them. Otherwise, they are the principal structure. Common sense, right? I know, I'm getting somewhere with this. So in our form-based code area, if you are a principal structure, or if you are the only structure on a lot, you are a principal structure, you have to meet all of these things that we talked about. You have to be certain heights. You have to be a certain distance. We talked about this to the road right of way. And the other thing we haven't talked about yet are what we call build-out percentages. Is that what we call it? Frontage build-outs. So of your lot, we require that you have that portion of that front of that lot covered in building. So you have to have your building covering a certain portion of that lot. Now, if you have a building, like the ones I've been showing you, it's pretty easy to do. Bring your building up. But if you have something like a pool maintenance shed, do you really want it to be 2 stories tall, 3 stories tall? Do you really want it to be at the road front, street front? Do you really want it to take up most of the road front? No, you probably want to sit at the back of your lot and house your mechanicals and have nobody really look at it ever. That can't happen in our current code. So that's the problem. The fix. Well, I haven't really worked through what the fix is yet. So we could say, that, you allow structures of a limited dimension and number to exist on lots which service certain types of amenities, recreational or otherwise, or something like that. So we'd bring you back language if you're supportive of that idea.
Mhm.
Not a lot of thought for you on this one if you're generally supportive of the idea.
Very good.
I'd like to add to that too.
Sure.
Because for our project, we have like a 14-acre park without any buildings, so we don't have a principal structure. We have another park that has the pool, and we like a maintenance shed. And if we're maintaining the multi-use paths and the pickleball courts and all the recreation areas, we need a plow truck. We need, and we don't, for now, our plan just has a fenced-in area because we're allowed to have a fence. We are enclosing this area with a fence, but, so it does make sense to us to have an accessory building on a lot that doesn't have a principal structure. And maybe there's a way to say, well, there is a principal use to have a pool. So I'm saying use, right? A pool is a use. A park has components that are uses. So if that helps with the language, I'd just throw that out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we call them service buildings. We'll figure something out.
Yep. You got a
Absolutely.
function.
Yeah. So,
What makes sense, kind of.
okay,
Yep.
I'm gonna move on. Building heights. So this one, I'm just gonna drop it and run. No, I'm just kidding. So I already previewed one of the I shouldn't say problems. I've already previewed one issue for you to consider. C streets are limited to 3 stories. To put that into perspective for you, there are other parts of town where 5 stories are permitted. There is a 5-story building on Prim Road, for example.
Yeah, that green one,
Yeah.
Is it green?
isn't it?
Yeah, it's like light green.
Yeah.
Like a beigey color, no? Is it green? I don't know. Yeah, but there's a 5-story building on Prim Road. Meanwhile, we have a 3-story building in our growth center. Is 3 stories, I'm asking you to consider, is 3 stories as a max height on any street the number that you believe is reflective of what it should be in our growth center? Especially if higher heights are allowed in less developed areas. You don't have to answer that.
I know, it's kind of a quirky area because it's
But it's 3
not
stories.
really
And again,
residential there
when you were
either.
thinking about this, it was a farm field. It was a nothing field. And so 3 stories may have felt like a lot. As you see these 3-story buildings, they still feel like a lot. There are, what's the tallest at, Seventh Green? Is there 5?
I think it's 4.
Is that 4?
It's 4 with a pitched roof, so it looks taller.
Okay. So again, food for thought. Think about the heights.
What's the maximum height?
So right now, A streets allow 5 stories, B streets allow 4, and C streets allow 3.
What, could it go a lot higher? Could it go, is there a limit to height?
I mean, I would say, of course, you want to consider your own community goals
Mm-hmm.
and your own character.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
But a lot of people hear a number and they think it's higher than it actually is. Again, if I told most of the community that there's a 5-story building on or we were going to approve a 5-story building on Prim Road, I think a lot of people might lose their mind until I tell them there actually is one. Because it blends in really well. You don't actually know it's there.
Setback.
It's set back.
How tall is the VNA building down there? Isn't that 4 stories there?
3?
It's great.
I think it's 3.
Yeah, and obviously there's quite tall ones at Water Tower Hill. Nobody bats an eye at those. So does 3 feel right to you? And it's okay if it does, but tell me if it's not, and it's time to make that adjustment if it doesn't feel right. As far as what's too tall, I would say you would always want to make sure you're keeping in mind your community, of course. You absolutely have to consider your emergency responses. Even towns that feel like they want to go taller, you have to know the limitations of your ladder trucks. So you would never want to do anything that's taller than you can rescue. But you already do allow 5. So I know 5 is at least a good number. Safe number, I should say. And after that, it's what you think is the right number. So chew on it. You don't have to decide, but think about it. Take a drive out there. Take a walk out there is actually what I would tell you. And walk both parts of the Sunderland that's been built, that's the newer ones, and walk through Severn's Corners Village Center, where the gazebo and stuff is. It feels very different when you're walking through there than if you're driving. So I encourage you, and I'm happy to go over. Call me, stop in, say, Kathy, come on. I'll go over with you. But walk through and look up, feel, look around, look at the windows, look at the doors, look at the heights, look at the gardens or the playgrounds or the designs, the windows.
Can you see the lake at 5 feet, at 5 stories?
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. I'm guessing not, because I don't think there's balconies on any of them. They probably would have put them on if you could.
That'd be so nice, a view of
Yeah.
Mounts Bay.
But you can see them from Water Tower Hill, so for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. It was real sad when I changed one of my doctors up there.
Figure that out.
I know.
Little apartment.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to go over, feel it out, and see what you think of it. And then walk around some other places too that feel similar. And feel those buildings out, and feel out heights and stuff, and get a feel for what. If something feels tall or looks tall to you, go stand next to it and measure it up, or feels not tall. Okay.
How do you quantify when you say community? What would the community, or how would it fit in with the community? How do you quantify that?
We need an
Are there some-
anthropologist
Yeah.
to
Are
come
there some
in.
architectural details that kind of run through the community, or some?
Yeah, I think it just.
By
guess
building
I'll
heights?
Well, just when you said something about know your community or something like that. I'm not clear about how specific you're being.
I guess I'm just saying it's not a technical answer. I've never heard anyone come to me and say, we hate Severn's Corners, the buildings are too tall. But maybe they've said it to you, I don't know. They've never said it to me. But it's not for me to decide.
And there'll be public input, right?
Of course.
There'll be a lot of public input, so people have that opportunity.
And again, I would say, land is limited, so you can't build out,
Yeah, you gotta go up.
But
Good.
Thank you.
Next. We got this one down.
okay.
My feet are freezing. My feet are freezing.
All right, we're almost done. I forget what I need by this one. Frontage build-outs. So I briefly introduced you guys to the concept of this. So when you have a lot, you have to build out a certain percentage of that lot. So you have a square, you have 100 feet, let's pretend you have 100 feet along it. We say you have to build somewhere between 40 and 60% of the front of that. You can't let a bunch of it sit dead and vacant. But these are arbitrary lines that people aren't actually seeing in reality, or on the ground, or on paper. And they don't take into account topography or natural resources or even driveways to get you that parking that might be behind it. And we don't really clarify whether the DRB can waive that in any scenarios. So I think there's a request here as to whether or not what can exist within that area. Does that sound? I think this was, Paul, a request that you sort of talked about. Did I represent that?
Yeah, I can describe, if you don't mind, I can describe the issue a little bit too. Diagrammatically, this isn't a real building. So lot 1, for instance, we have this finger of a wetland coming in with a buffer. That's that yellow line. And we have the lot here for that. Now, if this is our frontage, the frontage is how much of the property line is along the road itself. If we have to front 40 to 60% of that with building, can't do it because of the wetland finger. And I have to get a state wetland permit and an Army Corps permit. So what we did as a workaround for now, is it okay to talk about the workaround?
Vague terms.
This is just a code, this is as an example.
The
One
code
code.
allows
That's an
open
example.
space parcels. So you can have an open space parcel without a building on it.
One could do something like this.
Sure. So we
Something
have
to
lot 1A and 1B.
One could create 2 lots.
Create 2 lots.
One could say that the ones are not limited to the one you're seeing.
Yes.
There's other examples of
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
This is an example of a workaround.
So an alternative to having to create all these multiple lots, to do this might be to say, you could deduct natural resources from that lot frontage. Or you have to build out 40 to 60% of the usable, developable part of your lot. Or, so there's things we could do that just stop us from having to play wacky games with lines on paper.
Yep,
That don't matter, because at the end of the day, they're gonna look the same on the ground.
yep,
So that's what that is.
yep,
Okay.
Again, at the end of the day, they produce the same thing.
yeah. It's
So
step-
I would say, you take the frontage and you might deduct out natural resources. You might even deduct out, I would say, a driveway that accesses rear-loaded parking. Because if we're telling people they can't park in the front, they gotta get to it. You shouldn't be penalized for accessing it.
Right,
Excessive grade,
Steep slopes, maybe.
excessive grade maybe.
Yeah. I, categorize that along with resources.
yep,
Great sledding.
And then I would also say that, there's certain things that you can't put in that area, like, I would say here, like delivery or loading area, those are, I don't know, as a balance here.
yep.
It looks like there's a lot of open space on that lot. I mean, that'd be, I mean, if you could
It's all wetlands.
if you could put trails and stuff through that,
Yeah,
that would
you
be
could.
A
awesome.
lot of trails.
That's what's in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would
that's-
be,
Theoretically, there would be a lot of trails in a place like that.
for our
Theoretically,
consideration.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
One might have that.
One might have to bend some of the form-based code in order to deal with the natural resources. And by bending that code, you still wind up with a very nice
Yep.
setup. It's just, you have to bend it to get around some of the natural.
You bring up a good point, because we have the form-based code regulations, but we also have the PUD regulations.
Mhm.
And the PUD regulations actually state, and you read the purpose statement
Right.
in the PUD regulations, it does talk about being able to get waivers on dimensional requirements and other aspects of your project, as long as you're protecting things like natural resources, right? So that's allowed in your code,
Yeah.
and there's a table, and frontage actually is in that table. So the way I always read it was, we could ask for a waiver on frontage because of that. I don't know if it's been interpreted that way, so that's a question I have. So.
Okay, perfect.
All right,
All right,
I want to skip G.
yep,
You okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
sure.
Let me rephrase. I would recommend you skip G.
Yeah, we're going to recommend skipping G.
I second that motion.
All of it. Fine. Good.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
At least for today.
Yeah, because we'll have a full board and we're going to work it through again. G's a little more complicated. All right. Are we all good for right now? Don't get too confused, so, like I said, phase one gets easier when you,
No,
Yeah.
but it helps to hear from people.
Absolutely.
It helps to hear from you.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's like, oh, okay, this is kind of how you should be thinking about this.
Because we kind of think of it abstractly, but then when you have somebody
Yeah.
who's actually has
There's probably
implications.
so
it's-
many options that I wouldn't think of, that you wouldn't be thinking of.
Right tax code, how we can get around it. It's the same.
All right, I'm going to close this.
excuse me.
See the highlighted thing for
So we ready to move on? All good?
minutes.
Yes.
'Cause I-
Oh,
Now's the time. Oh, yeah, to make it barely.
you read that one?
You want water?
No, we already.
We do have bottles.
I'll take a bottle, thank you.
Yes.
I need a motion for the minutes, please.
I motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting.
Second. Yes, all in favor?
Hi.
All right, now we need the commission meeting schedule. Thank you.
Oh, Kathy's so good.
So I know with short people, Rebecca did let me know that she's available July 2nd. I'll let you know let me see if Vlad wrote back. I did not hear back from him. So your July meeting, as a reminder, would be July 2nd. That is a holiday week. I know a lot of people travel. Rebecca is not available, I think, the following week.
I don't think I am either in the second round.
The following week.
Yeah.
What's
I'm on-
that day? What's the second week's day?
The 9th?
Night.
Yeah.
So do we stick with the 2nd? Is anybody known to travel that week?
I got 2 weddings for my kids. I'm not going anywhere, but
There you go.
I'm practically,
Have family visiting, which hopefully it won't be too long a meeting.
Yeah. Works for me.
I have no agenda for you yet, so we'll,
Okay.
I'll chat with Rich and figure out what it looks like.
Yeah.
But we'll hold the 2nd.
okay.
We're not going to pick an alternate date at any rate.
Okay.
Does that sound fair?
Yep.
It's the 2nd or nothing,
And not July 9th.
not July 9th.
That works.
Sound good?
Yep.
Okay, we need a motion to adjourn. Please.
I move that we adjourn this planning board meeting.
Second?
I second it.
Oh, there you go. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. 9:15. Thank you.
You okay?
Oh, apparently.
Yeah,
I'll take a pen,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
yep.
Almost made it.
It's drying here because
Yeah.
it's just drying.
I did a